Welcome to February, Hooligans. This is Jay Hooligan, and thank you for joining me this week. And thank you to Hooligan V, who is also joining me again for this one because there's a lot of information we're going over. Last week we talked about defense mechanisms and how they can kind of tend to overwhelm us if we're not vigilant about it and being mindful about all that stuff. This week we're going a little bit more into the chemical and biological versions of it and why it is this way, why it's so hard to get, say, reactionary emotions under control. And it really does come down to the science of it. So thank you again, Hooligan V, for joining me on this. It's a lot of big words and stuff, so bear with us on this. It is a long one, but I guarantee you at the end of this there is a reason why we're going into all this and why it's important. So yeah, we can just jump right into it. Alright, so first off, I love this study that they did. Did you actually know that just simulating a smile can release endorphins and make you feel happier? Yes, there was an actual study that was done at the University of Kansas by Tara Kraft and Sarah Pressman. And what they had found was that if you bite your pencil, just putting a pencil in your mouth in the third picture in this one, it will actually signal your body to start releasing endorphins, so then you start feeling a lot better. And it's a physiological reaction that happens seamlessly, and it just kind of shows you that doing things mindfully can actually get you to a place of control over certain aspects of, say, stress. So if you didn't know about this study, I think they actually do teach that at, was it like Harvard or somewhere like that. I remember there was another class. There was a happiness class that they had, and they literally teach you this about this study, and they'll have to do it. But in these three pictures, if you notice that people that do bite on a pen in different manners doesn't necessarily elicit that same sort of physiological response. Just like the same way breathing, as in deep abdominal breathing, when you're breathing low and deep, will help stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system, is not the same as breathing shallow, like you're catching your breath during exercise. So making sure you do that. I did want to mention though, like, this is not a catch-all. It doesn't mean it happens instantaneously or even all the time, because your emotions are very complex. All right, there's a lot of things involved, including not just your psychology, but your physiology, your biology, all these different things that are built into our systems on helping us mitigate that. And just running, because a lot of it's run just unconsciously by our bodies. So I think what I wanted to start with on here, this is the inner smile. That was something I totally forgot to touch upon. I found out about the inner smile when I was studying Taoism and other Eastern beliefs, and that whole idea is when you meditate, you focus on uplifting your energy, just like the smile of biting a pen or pencil sideways. The physiological feeling that you get, you can focus on that and start replicating that, and just like have that uplifting, like you feel that coming up through. And then it goes through steps on this. But again, Taoism, it's a little known one. I didn't know about it for many years studying meditation, and then I happened across it, and I thought, oh yeah, it just makes sense. And then they started coming out with more of these studies that show that physiologically speaking, you can do it just by biting a pen or a pencil. So yeah, on that one, yeah, this was a very big article. I wanted to go over a bit on emotions, and there's many different types of theories out there, emotional theories. This particular one was 6 basic types of emotions and their effect on human behavior, and I believe they run off of was it Dr. Paul Ekman and his daughter Dr. Eve Ekman, where they're actually running an interactive mapping of emotions on, they're calling it the Atlas of Emotions, where they're taking photos associated with these 6 basic, actually 5 basic emotions. I know this one says 6 basic ones, but on their atlas they kind of narrowed it down to 5. By the time this particular article was written, the 6 were happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, and surprise. And then the 5 basic ones for the Atlas of Emotions that they did was, because they surveyed 248 scientists, they wanted to try to get a general consensus in the science community, and that's anger, disgust, enjoyment, fear, and sadness. So that's what the Atlas was trying to make, trying to highlight through that. And I believe, like I said, they're doing a whole photo, interactive photo montage of what they're trying to do. I want to look more into it. I don't know for certain, but it's something interesting you can look up at. Outside of that, I believe it talks in this article, because it goes over a lot of it, and there's this whole breakdown between it, but it does go into other theories of emotions, where they talk about primary. Now, instead of just basic emotions, you have primary, secondary, and tertiary emotions. And your primary ones are essentially like anger, disgust, enjoyment, fear, sadness, all those main ones that they had. Your secondary emotions were supposed to be ones that kind of derive from that, becoming a little more specific, and even further into it, going a step further into your tertiary emotions. An example they give here is if one of your primary emotions is love, your secondary emotions would be aspects like affection and longing. So you can kind of see that it kind of comprises that overarching primary emotion of love by having those secondaries like affection and longing. It kind of consists of it. And then you go even further with that. I believe they said if you go into affection, which is the secondary emotion, into tertiary emotions such as liking, caring, compassion, and tenderness. So all that just means it was kind of like a tiered way of viewing it. Some people agree with it, some people don't. It's just one way to view that. However, I am actually a fan of psychologist Robert Plutchik. I hope I'm saying his name right. And his Wheel of Emotions, which this is his Wheel of Emotions. Wheel of Emotions, turn, turn, turn. Tell us a lesson that we should learn. And what I like about it is there are 8 different emotions on here, basic emotions. And with this wheel, with this whole wheel on here, it's the center ones which are your basic 8. So joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation. And as you go further outward and less, there's less of a saturation on the color, those are lesser versions of it. And more towards the center, these ones here are actually more intense versions of each of the emotions. So for joy, right, the more intense version of that is ecstasy. For sadness, the more intense version of that is grief. Or anger, it goes to rage, versus annoyance, which is on the opposite end of it. These ones in between, the gray ones in between, are overlaps. And the way that it kind of goes is, say if you have a combination of joy and anticipation, you'll subsequently get optimism, which I can't click on that. It's wonderful.
I don't think you can see your mouse on here.
No, I think I disabled the mouse, but that's okay. Yeah, because if I click on that, that's gonna go in here. But yeah, if you have joy and anticipation, it'll create optimism. And then I think I was talking to you earlier about this too, where it's very closely aligned to, say, if you have anticipation and anger or annoyance, you'll get aggressiveness. And a lot of people kind of view that as well, obviously it's a negative thing, because being too aggressive, like when they see CEOs being aggressive with certain things,
right,
like they might have a combination, because it does say that you could have a combination of three different basic emotions, and that can create newer nuances of that emotion, right? So say again, like kind of going back to that CEO, because a lot of people think CEOs are jerks, which a lot of them may be, but a lot of times too, they're trying to build a business that they're passionate about, so something that brings them joy, anticipation of succeeding, but they might be annoyed or angry about maybe execution, maybe when they get the results of the sales, they're not what they expected, so then it starts coming across like that.
Trying to understand where they're coming from, right?
Correct. Yes. and clarity of message, trying to understand not just from where you're coming from, but where other people are. Again, that might be a form of displacement, that could be a projection, there could be so many different things involved. Like I said, your emotions, your mind, your psychology, there's so many different aspects of yourself that make it all complex, and there is no cookie cutter version of it. But again, understanding stuff like this can actually help you at least get a better footing, so you have much more of a lexicon to discuss it, label it, discuss it, and hopefully mitigate any negative or adverse reactions that you might have. So this is Plutchik's wheel of emotions. I think the last thing I missed on here was another reason why I like this particular one is these emotions are lined up in a specific way where the opposite side of them is its polar opposite. So opposite of joy is grief, opposite of admiration is loathing, opposite of terror is rage, opposite of amazement is vigilance. Right? So there's many different levels for it, and I actually really like this version of it. That's just my preference. You might find the mapping of emotions, the 6 basic ones from Ekman and his daughter, both doctors, by the way, much more relatable, and that's okay. Whichever one is your favorite one, run with it. But this is those are at least 2 different ones, and of course there are other versions of emotional theory that are out there. I highly suggest you go research them, just like we're doing here. What's next? Oop. Where's the mouse? Right.
Delete that.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I ended up accidentally closing the tab, but we are back on track. Here is after understanding the different emotion theories of emotion, and again, Noah just gave you 2, which are examples of it. I like this particular article that I found. It talks about how hormones and chemicals are linked to our emotions. Again, why I wanted to go over more diverse sources that you can kind of research on your own and how it actually works. And even here, very first thing, emotions are very complex and have different meanings to different people, but essentially emotions are a conscious experience that are categorized by states of mind, external and internal reactions, and expressions. So with that whole smiling mitigating, or that smiling eliciting that emotional response of being happy, right? That's kind of like a backwards way into it. It is a way to kind of almost hack it, but again, may not always work because they are complex. But they talk about it being like expressions being a very big part of emotional theory, that they're going about that. And then they list a bunch of emotions. Emotions are not really made out of anything, but how we feel emotions can be described. So emotions come from the arousal of the nervous system. Millions of chemical reactions take place in the brain at any given time. Chemical reactions occur because of synapses. Synapses are parts of the nervous system, and it is through these that neurons are able to transmit messages using neurotransmitters. Emotions are typically measured in physiological responses, such as expressions, right, or body language, such as, and other things too, such as pounding heart, sweating, blood rushing to the face, and the release of adrenaline. Expression is also a major part of emotions. Expression is associated with parts of the nervous system, such as the motor cortex, limbic system, and the brainstem. Parts of the nervous system that affect emotion the most are the frontal lobes and the amygdala, which we talked about, I think it was two weeks ago. So we had that. So your frontal lobes versus your amygdala, which is your lower brain, versus your higher brain, your frontal lobe, which helps regulate a lot of that. The frontal cortex is usually associated with feelings of happiness and pleasure, and the amygdala is usually associated with feelings of anger, fear, or sadness. Again, lower brain versus higher brain function. So anger, fear, sadness, they are built into us. That is part of our brain. It's just built into our system, and again, it is for reasons of survival and adaptation of why we're built that way. And then why it does that, again, is chemically how it reacts within our body, but is generally from a standpoint of just evolutionary survival, how we were built, and why you can't eliminate the emotions. They're there for very specific purposes of survival, right? They help us stay, help us to survive for those quick incidents. Emotions in that side of the brain help us flip to be reactive in the proper way to hopefully get out of a dangerous situation. So it's not something you can ever eliminate. And again, where we run into trouble is when excuse me, most people run into trouble is when they let their emotions like rule them and rule all parts of their life, and so then they don't feel fulfilled. They miss out all the different areas of life that that gives them balance, and all of a sudden everything is just hellish, right? Or negative, or in a depressive state, or too much anxiety, too much stress, and you get these reactions of anger, fear, and sadness on your lower brain, just because of how it operates.
Do you think that where was I going with that?
Do I think that? Yes, I do think that. That's like
that because you had mentioned something that caught my mind.
Like lower brain, higher brain,
right?
Reactionary.
Oh, so for instinctively acting on emotion, right? But not all of the times that the emotions that we give are the right things to give to that person. So would it be more instinct, or would it just be more irrational?
Well, okay, so again, your rational mind is different than your logical brain. Your frontal lobe is where a lot of that organizational processes happen. It's different than your lower brain, which is like where your emotions, like the amygdala, like it's talking about. So I guess you can say that more of those instinctual reactions, or those reactions are more instinctual, for purposes of survival. That's how it's built into us, and it's done on purpose. So, I mean, like I said, where we kind of get in trouble, where people get in trouble with it, is they let those base reactionary emotions stay. As if it's fact, it's there, it's done. And then not realizing like that sort of, like there are people that are using their higher brain functions, where they can manipulate other people because they know how they're going to react. Like it's the exact same thing that they do in hunting. Hunting, that why is it such a stressful, say like what is it, like the foxes, when they used to hunt foxes with the dogs, and they release the fox and the hound dogs are going after them and they're all hunting. It's very stressful for the fox, and even though they're doing it for sport, it's like it's very stressful for them, because if they know, and they could rely, because animals particularly rely on their lower brain function of these base emotions to survive. But then they become predictable. If I can scare it in one direction, that means it'll drive it to somewhere that I may know is more advantageous for me if I'm hunting it, right? So does that kind of answer your question? I know it's kind of a roundabout way of putting it. I didn't directly really answer it. Because again, it is a complex thing, because it happens instantaneous. Mm-hmm. And then emotional stress, physical stress, like all these different things are contributors, and again, because we're not living out in the woods, we're not out in nature, just trying to survive just with our base needs of food, shelter, clothing and things like that. We've moved beyond that, and now we have other things that actually cause us stress. So perspective is a huge one on here.
Okay.
So hopefully that does answer your question.
It does, yeah.
Okay, cool. Alright, so yeah, we experience a variety of emotions throughout the day. Mostly these emotions are transient in nature, but when these emotions become intensely negative or are unremitting, they can dramatically affect our biochemistry and behavior. So that's just what I was talking about. Certain brain areas in the presence of levels of different chemicals in your brain controls emotions. For example, if we are in danger, our brain releases stress hormones that can initiate fight or flight reactions, like in your sympathetic nervous system, by flooding certain regions with the neurotransmitter epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline. There's also other chemicals involved in that, which we'll go over. When the danger subsides, our brain inhibits the stress response by sending out a calming signal in the form of chemicals, like breathing or yawning. lack of oxygen. And that's one way that, well, just the deeper breaths. And I think I mentioned that it's like I don't really sigh anymore per se. And when I meant it, and it sounds like I'm sighing during that video. It's just me releasing, consciously expending my breath so I can take a moment. What I meant was like that involuntary sigh where you're overly stressed and you get that like very outward, very involuntary one. So that's what I meant. I don't really get those involuntary ones because I do sigh, like I do breathe consciously and mindfully. So
are we sure it's not the lack of caffeine though?
Caffeine, okay, then we can get into a lot of that stuff too. Chemicals. If you don't know, I don't know if I've mentioned it in previous videos. I am not a big proponent or an advocate for using pills of any sort to change up how to deal with our stress. I am always for actually doing it naturally through the food we eat, through our exercises, through our mentality, right? So building up from there. And that's not to say that there aren't people that actually do need certain medications and things like that because of maybe they have a disorder or disease which is preventing their body from producing certain chemicals which will help maintain balance in emotionally, psychologically, physiologically. And those people do need those. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. I am not okay with people doing it in a manner of like, hey, I decided to change my lifestyle, but now I have a huge deficiency in something just on that. Or are given things. I think we talked about it too briefly about I think it was the other day we're talking about like say counseling or therapy. A lot of people say it doesn't work, but a lot of those people don't actually commit to the changes that are discussed in those sessions fully. Like, oh yeah, I did that stuff and it didn't work. I'm like, well, what did you do? That's why my question is like, well, I'm trying. My very first question is, what are you trying? How? And then my second one is, how long did you try it for? Because consistency matters, and action, execution, and consistency matter the most in these sort of things, right? That's a whole huge side note on there, but that does get back into, like I said, like even recreational stuff. Like I've been pulling back from like alcohol consumption. It is recreational, just because it's like even things like alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, all these chemicals help change your physiology, your biochemistry inside of you, and can have adverse effects, especially when you cut those things out of your life, right? You start cutting, you go cold turkey, your body literally craves that because the environment it created and has adapted to of you continuously taking stuff, right? It's used to that. That's how it learned to adapt and operate. So when you go cold turkey and you don't lower it down, step by step, you now have much more of a chance to relapse, to actually go back into that behavior. And that goes for anything. That can go for alcohol, that can go for harder drugs, it can go for recreational things, that can even go for overeating, like stress foods and sugar and soda. Sugar is one of the worst ones, I think, that's out there. And again, it creates that environment where your body's doing that. So again, understanding a little bit more about the science is what's going to help, I think, in my opinion. That may not be what your opinion is, which is fine. But yeah, that's my whole side note to this. Whew. All right. So what we were talking about on this, where do we leave off? Intensely negative, got all that. Certain brain areas, level of different chemicals in your brain. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the nervous system, how it runs into that. So hormones and chemicals keep the body working normally, and then it goes through a few of these. I'm not going to go through estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone because those are pretty standard. That is a note on there too, that the way that men and women are built, they are different biologically, and it does have to do with our physiology and biology with this, and how our body actually releases certain chemicals into our body, and how we react to different medications because of that anatomy. It's literally anatomy and physiology, and then obviously biology depending. And again, why it's not cookie cutter, right? It's not cookie cutter to say, hey, you're a man and you only have testosterone. Your testosterone rules. you know, or you're a woman, you only have estrogen rules. There are always different levels. It matters on each individual basis. But aside from all that stuff, I wanted to go over some of these other ones. So first one on the list, dopamine, your motivation and reward chemical. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter released by the hypothalamus and is involved in focus, attention, memory, drive, muscle control, and ovulation, obviously for women. It is associated with alertness, memory, cognition, happiness, and vigilance. Low levels of dopamine in the body can result in depression, impulsivity, mood swings, attention deficit, cognitive issues, compulsive behavior, cravings, apathy, and a loss of satisfaction in life activities. It inhibits rational thinking as seen in schizophrenia. So, and I believe that we're trying to say low levels can affect it. Not that doesn't, just dopamine in general is seen in schizophrenia. I might be wrong though. That I'll have to research that a little bit more. It also says dopamine is important in the brain's reward system, and elevations in its level can lead to addictive behavior, suspicious personality, and possible paranoia. Again, these are extremes, you know, and why, again, I'm more of an advocate for lifestyle changes, for dietary changes, because those are things you can control, and then cutting out a lot of recreational chemicals, whether it be recreational or legal or non, you know, just to help mitigate and maintain a healthier body, you know. And again, I fall off on that too. It's just life. You know, there are no food sources. So this one's interesting. There are no food sources that can provide dopamine directly, but consider taking foods rich in tyrosine and phenylalanine. I was like, I said it right? Phenylalanine. Phenylalanine. The amino acids required to manufacture dopamine. So both of these amino acids are seen in protein-rich foods like turkey, chicken, milk, cheese, and eggs. Yes. And I found out tyrosine is actually an amino acid. It derives from tyros, which is Greek for cheese. So while you have that. But again, that's something, like I said, when people don't have certain foods in their diet, or they have an overabundance of it, you know, that can cause a lot of physiological and, by extension, even psychological changes that may be undesirable, right? I think I tried to look up like phenylalanine and what it was, including tyrosine, and it's just an amino acid. It's a building block. But what I thought was kind of interesting in here is that it's used, like they will actually use this for a skin disease called I don't know how to say that. Vitiligo. But it's also used for depression, attention deficient hyperactivity disorder, so ADHD, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, pain, acupuncture, anesthesia, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, weight loss, and alcohol withdrawal systems. So they will actually use manufactured phenylalanine for that. But I think it's here too. It also mentions like how does it work. It's actually one of those things that there's not much information about it. Because the tyrosine and what it does, again, amino acid, melanin, so involved in melanin pigment that gives you your skin color, hair, and eyes. Yeah. So yeah, changing your diet can essentially change your biological and chemical makeup in your body. Oh, that's for journaling and whatnot, and we'll go over that. So next on this particular list is serotonin, which is your happiness hormone. So it regulates a range of physiological and biological functions, including mood, arousal, aggression, thinking abilities, and memory. Right levels of serotonin are related to relaxation, mood upliftment, right? Excess of serotonin causes sedation and apathy, so a lack of interest or enthusiasm in life. Whereas deficiency of serotonin is associated with low mood, lack of will, poor appetite control, anxiety disorders, depression, social behavior, and sexual problems. Conditions like anxiety disorders, depression, impulsivity, mood disorders, and disturbance in the sleep-wake cycle, obesity, eating disorders, and chronic pain are associated with disruptions in serotonin level. Meditation enhances serotonin production by inhibiting activity in the stress-producing regions of the brain. First one that I found that was like that was talking about that. And again, why it's important. And again, we'll actually go a little bit deeper into that. I do have an article from Harvard Medical School that does kind of explain a little bit more about it and why it's hard to mitigate emotions, because it is built into our systems and is an unconscious action. Acetylcholine, neurotransmitter. Oxytocin. I don't think I found much in this one. Information processor. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. So oxytocin is a hormone that is made in the hypothalamus and released into the blood by the pituitary gland. It plays a role in pro-social behavior, sexual reproduction, and during and after childbirth. It evokes feelings of contentment, calmness, security, and reductions in anxiety level. Oxytocin inhibits brain areas associated with behavioral control of fear and anxiety and protect against stress. So a lot of those lower brain functions, like I said, from the amygdala, that's driving a lot of those negative emotions. Okay, and it does say in here, it talks about like nasally administered, so more the supplemental side of it or medical side of it, and how MDMA or ecstasy increases those feelings of it. And then a deficiency in oxytocin is involved with physiology of depression and is related to poor communication, more anxiety and fear, disturbed sleep, sugar cravings, and irritability. Again, this is another reason, like I said, trying to take these things in pill form or recreational drugs will alter your internal chemistry and will create an environment. It will adapt to it, but when you try to get off of it, it will cause problems because now it has to readapt to the new environment that you've created for it. So, all right, and then GABA, your brain activity regulator, gamma aminobutyric acid, it's just another neurotransmitter. Testosterone, someone's going over. Norepinephrine and epinephrine. So your stress-fighting hormones, right? Norepinephrine is a catecholamine that acts as a neurotransmitter as well as a hormone. It is involved in arousal system in the arousal system of the brain and the sympathetic nervous system, where it is responsible for increase in blood pressure, breathing, and respiratory rate. As a hormone, it is released by adrenal glands and is involved in the fight or flight response of the body to stress. And I believe it was I'm not sure if I have that particular article, but it does have to do with your receptors, the differences between norepinephrine and epinephrine, and I believe norepinephrine deals directly with constricting your blood vessels, so it increases blood pressure by restricting your blood vessels, but it does also help with adrenaline, with epinephrine, where it does increase the heart rate, it increases your breathing, pumps your heart harder, and then it just changes your body in there. So epinephrine or adrenaline released by the medulla of the adrenal glands surges at a time of panic and emergency. It provokes a stress response and brings out the arousal of extreme emotions like fear, anger, and amusement. Again, those lower brain emotions. Too little norepinephrine and epinephrine have been found to be associated with depression, while an excess has been seen in mood disorders like schizophrenia. So that's why I was like, okay, the catecholamine test is what I found on here. Your adrenal glands are located on top of your kidneys, but they do help with dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. I'm trying to remember because I think there was other parts of this too. Because a lot of these things, like I was reading over a lot of them, it's a lot of interesting tests and where they go from it. But yeah, it's so interesting in how our body is built, and how all these things go here. Here we go. What are their functions? Epinephrine is increased blood sugar levels. That's right, for increased activity. Increased heart rate. Increased contractility, how hard the heart squeezes. Relaxation of smooth muscles in the airways to improve breathing. So all these chemical reactions are happening instantaneously or unconsciously, I should say, when your body releases epinephrine. And then norepinephrine is has effects. They have similar effects such as increased blood sugar levels, increased heart rate, increased contractility. But again, here we go. It also can cause blood vessels to narrow, which increases blood pressure. So that's typically the big difference between them, because they're both released on there. And then that does kind of relate to your cortisol levels and how that helps keep your body revved up in your fight or flight mode. Again, we'll get to that. Next on this list is endorphins. How you doing? It's a lot. Okay, I know it's a lot of information. Just take a moment. Breathe. Slow inhale. Slower exhale. Center. Grab some water. Stretch it out. Do whatever you need to do to loosen up. I know it's a lot of information. I guarantee you we're almost done with the chemical side and all the chemistry stuff. There's a couple more, but there's one other big one that we're running into. Okay, so phew, nice little break we had there. All right, back onto it. Yes, I can switch it on just like that. All right, endorphins, pain reliever. So endorphins are neurotransmitters, chemicals that pass along signals from one neuron to the next. Neurotransmitters play a key role in the function of the central nervous system and can either prompt or suppress the further signaling of nearby neurons. The class of endorphins include 3 compounds. That's alpha endorphin, beta endorphin, and I believe it's gamma endorphin, which you don't really know. It just means there's 3 different types. Technically, I found one article that said there was 4 types. Yeah, one that actually said there are 4 types: alpha, beta, gamma, and sigma, but I couldn't really find any information on the sigma ones anyway, so again, these are all things that we might be discovering in the now, so things to look out for. Alright, endorphins are produced as a response to certain stimuli, especially stress, fear, or pain. They originate in various parts of the body, the pituitary gland, spinal cord, and throughout other parts of the brain and nervous system, and interact mainly with receptors and cells found in regions of the brain responsible for blocking pain and controlling emotion. So, cool little fact here, endorphin is actually from endogenous, which means in like within the body, and morphine. So it is a naturally occurring pain reliever that's similar to morphine. It's similar to morphine. So, endorphin. Where did I leave off on? So, endorphins block pain, so just like morphine, but they're also responsible for our feelings of pleasure. It's widely believed that these feelings of pleasure exist to let us know when we've had enough of a good thing, and also to encourage us to go after that good thing in order to feel the associated pleasure later on. Maintaining a balance in these brain chemicals is a key for balanced emotions. One can help maintain emotional health to some extent by altering levels of these key chemicals through a balanced diet, limited stress, constructive thoughts, and then it's like yoga, pranayama, and meditation. So, other places, again, advocating for those types of actions that you can take, mindful actions that you can take and follow through with to help mitigate your stress levels and increase your endorphins, increase your release of other hormones and chemicals in your body that will help reduce the stress factor and leave you out of that whole pain or angry or I can't even think of it. Yeah, just that whole aggressive sort of side, that lower brain function. Okay. So when we exercise, the body releases endorphins. I know there are other ones on here. Oh, that's epinephrine. There are other ones on here. So what are endorphins? Endorphins, yeah. What are they? Ever feel amazed after a good hard workout? Yeah. So that's something I've talked about. I think I've told you about this too. One of the tricks and tips in marketing, which gyms and even martial arts schools, anything with the physical activity, what they'll do is they'll offer you a free trial. And a lot of times that free trial can range from like 3 days to a week to a month long. But it's done on purpose. Why? Because you're going to feel good working out. And if you have a limited time for you to use a certain trial period, right, you're more likely to go anyway. And if you're more likely to go, you will have a release of endorphins. You will have that decrease of pain and increase in pleasure, right, from it. And then they'll ask you to sign up after your trial. It's a great ploy, I get it, but it is also a marketing ploy for it that is utilized all the time and everywhere. Especially in, again, aspects of working out, right? I'm trying to see what else is on this one. This was why I kept this one. So what are the benefits of endorphins? There's a lot of different things here. So alleviating depression, reducing stress and anxiety, boosting your self-esteem, reducing weight, and helping you deal with pain during childbirth, which I'll never have to experience. So, yeah.
I mean, if you did, like, that would be like, what, Guinness World Record?
What was that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger? And they supposedly attached a fetus or something. Junior? Was it called Junior?
I don't remember.
I think it was called Junior.
Talking about.
Yeah, because I mean the whole idea of providing nutrients, you know, I know there was a theory long ago that said you can technically attach, you know, the fetus to any organ, right, to pull nutrients from, and it can survive. But how long it can survive depends on like the organ, which is why women are built for child rearing. Yeah, it's so I mean it was an interesting movie for the concept of it, but I think that was during that time when that study came out that they made that movie. But it just reminded me of it. I totally forgot about that. Okay, so, and then this one, yeah, there's alpha, beta, gamma, and sigma endorphins. All right, so all that kind of ties into what I liked about it was how it runs into your stress and emotion. And I found this particular graphic. It was actually, I found it searching after I found a doctor's presentation they had for school that they had posted online. And I saw this thing and I was like, it's kind of an interesting one here. And it's the stress and emotions creation cycle. And so when stress is added to the body, whether it's physical or emotional, it moves to our liver and gallbladder. And again, this is more of the Eastern, it was more of an Eastern belief that they had on here, so that's where it derived from. But yeah, so physical symptoms: the liver produces more cholesterol, bile production becomes imbalanced, impairing digestion, blood stagnates in the liver, reducing its ability to detoxify the body. That's just the combination of stress, anger, jealousy, envy, and frustration. That's with after stress. Moving on to the third cycle, or third step on this cycle, has to do with the heart and small intestine, negative emotions, hate, cruelty, and impatience. I think I missed that. Liver and gallbladder was the first one. Negative emotions, anger, jealousy, and envy. So with the heart and small intestine, stress, anger, hate, impatience, and cruelty. The physical symptoms, palpitations, high blood pressure, chest pain. And I believe this is just when you're cycling through. These are more extreme when you get to that. Moves, again, that stress cycle moves to your spleen and stomach and pancreas. Negative emotions are worry, anxiety, and mistrust. Stress plus anger plus hate plus worry plus anxiety plus mistrust creates the physical symptoms of impaired digestion, which already happened before, too. Difficulty eliminating waste produced by digestion. All right, so all these things keep going back to digestion, right? How well we can actually pull those nutrients from our body, and why stress eating can be a thing to try to help satisfy certain parts that are disrupted. Okay, going into 5, lungs and large intestine. Negative emotions, sadness, depression. Stress plus anger plus anxiety plus depression plus sadness equals the physical symptoms of breathing problems, decreased oxygen in the blood, constipation. And finally, moving on to your kidney and bladder. Your negative emotions The negative emotion being fear. All right. Physical symptoms, or excuse me, it's stress plus anger plus anxiety plus depression plus sadness plus fear. Right, so it just keeps adding on to it, and how it could, remember we're talking about like our primary emotions, or secondary emotions, tertiary emotions, and then how it all kind of interrelates to each other, and they're very complex. This is kind of like that stress cycle that they're trying to show in this one. So all those things together add the physical symptoms of loss of primordial or sexual energy, the body becomes acidic, the nervous system becomes stressed, and loss of life force, or like your enthusiasm. So you start becoming more apathetic. And remember, we're talking about like your other hormones that are involved, and where a lack of can create some of those similar things for it.
So can you become sick?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what they're trying to show is increased levels of stress. And well, I think this cycle, because you notice like through the bladder, it's like there's an arrow out. However, that can cycle back through if you don't have any system of mitigation to relieve that stress, and it'll just keep going through your system, causing havoc inside, right? And I think I mentioned this too, psychologically, you know, if you don't deal with certain emotions, or you're just not allowed to feel them, and you try to repress them and suppress them, it causes havoc in your psyche, right? And it starts messing with your mind in certain ways, because it's like garbage in your house. You can't just eliminate it. It's gonna smell, it's gonna fester, it's gonna create other problems in it.
Sweeping it under the rug, like
sweeping it under the rug. Yep, exactly. So I mean, there are whole reasons why this. One of these things like that really got to me though is like the body becomes acidic, and I wasn't sure what they were talking about, so I did a little more research on it, and I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be like an actual physical acidity, or if that's supposed to be a more psychological thing. It does have it under physical symptoms, and so I was looking back on it, because whenever I come across things like this, especially you know when it comes to more on graphics like this, I'm always questioning the media that I consume and the information that I do consume, and seeing if it can relate back to, say, the science which is actually there. So how can it relate, or can it even relate to the hormones and the chemicals of the emotions and how they're involved in this, because this all has to deal with the same sort of stuff. So what I had found was, I believe it was through Healthline. Yep, your acid-base balance is, again, I wasn't sure what that actually meant with being overly acidic, and acidosis means that you're overly acidic, and that is an actual thing. And there's a balance between that. So your body maintains homeostasis, which is a general balance between everything. Okay, what are we, about 70% water is what that was. And so I always like say that too. It's like when people don't drink enough water, it's like think of yourself as like a pail full of water. Okay, what happens if you leave that water out in the open to the elements? Gets nasty, it starts to fester, it starts building mold, it starts building all these negative things in there, bugs start going in there, and you would never drink that water, right? Well, you okay? Man, it is so exciting, a lot of stuff happening here today, so I gotta take a break. Things are crashing, it's raining cats and dogs, hysteria. Alright, what I was talking about from the last website was, I wasn't sure how it related to being the body becoming more acidic, if that meant like your blood, it meant your body, I didn't know what it meant. And then I found this particular article, which it does address that there are two versions of acidosis, which is an increase in acidity in the body. And I think I was mentioning, I don't know if I mentioned it beforehand or not, about the whole water bucket. You know, as your body is a water bucket, and if you let it fester without replenishing the water, right, that flow of water through it, you can get problems in your body from it, which is why drinking water is important, right? Between your 3 meals, you got 3 snacks, and then between those, you can drink water throughout the day and regulate it. And I know it's tough to do, especially with everybody that has working lives, right? And it's not always tangible, but we can do the best that we can to just make sure that we are consuming enough water and food and the right types of food throughout the day to help give us the best balance that we can get. All right. What I had found in here to try to verify the last site was this. There are two different types of acidosis, respiratory and metabolic. And they are kind of closely related here. In respiratory acidosis, when you breathe, your lungs remove the excess carbon dioxide from your body. When they cannot do so, your blood and other fluids become too acidic. So, symptoms of respiratory acidosis, they may include fatigue, shortness of breath, and confusion. Again, this is not a way to kind of be like, oh, that's just the cause of it. Be sure you go to your doctor. They have tests for these things to make sure. Okay? Cause of respiratory acidosis. There are several different causes of respiratory acidosis, including chest deformities or injuries, chronic lung and airway diseases, overuse of sedatives, and obesity. Okay? I know they were talking about types of it. And again, they go over all these different types of things, the treatments. This is why I like Healthline. They're very thorough. Metabolic acidosis. So metabolic acidosis occurs either when your body produces too much acid or when your kidneys are unable to remove it properly. So what did that mention on the last one? What were the last two organs or groups of organs? The lungs and large intestines, and the kidney and the bladder. Right? When your kidney doesn't do its job, it can actually lead to your body becoming too acidic. So there is science that might be able to back this up, saying that it is possible that this stress complex, which does disrupt everything, it minimizes your nutrients from your digestive tract, or from digestion, minimizes resources so that it can be put into a better fight or flight position, and how it can relate to your overall health over things when you rely too much on it, or you're stuck too much in your sympathetic nervous system. So I thought that was really interesting with that. So causes of metabolic acidosis: prolonged exercise. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that exercise is bad. Lack of oxygen, certain medications including salicylates, low blood sugar or hypoglycemia, alcohol, seizures, liver failure, cancer, kidney disease, severe dehydration, and poisoning from consuming too much aspirin, ethylene glycol, and methanol. So, like, I didn't know how closely related those two were. And I found this other article from Dr. Roach when they were talking about maintaining the pH balance. And I'm just going to read this to you guys from here. Dr. Roach, the question was regarding a recent column, if a body does not need help in maintaining pH balance, why does the consumption of different foods cause changes in urine pH? So, like I said, when it's your body's automatically doing that, and they do have tests that they run, which is why a urine sample is one of the tests they usually run when you go to the emergency room, right? Things that they're looking for. Your body's built a certain way, but it can, over time, with too much stress, become disrupted. It can become damaged, and why we need to be more vigilant with our lifestyles and the choices that we make, right? Not let them rule us. So Dr. Roach's response to this is, the body has two main organs with which to regulate pH. The acid-base status of the body based on food intake, exercise, medications, and other causes that would perturb the body's pH, which is very tightly regulated and slightly alkaline at about 7.4. Again, that's that pH scale. The more important and faster acting is the lung. By increasing the respiratory rate, we excrete more carbon dioxide, which is in equilibrium with carbonic acid. Again, so it's in equilibrium with carbonic acid. So again, all these things are happening unconsciously in your body. We're built this way, automatically. This is happening every day, all the time. All right? Breathing more deeply and quickly can move the blood pH towards the alkaline side. All right? This usually happens without our being aware of it. The kidneys are the other important organ for long-term regulation of pH. The kidneys can regulate reabsorption of carbonic acid in the tubule, increasing or reducing acid secretion. So, urine that is more acidic than normal may mean the body is ridding itself of excess dietary acid and thus making blood pH more alkaline. Ammonia is another way the kidney can regulate pH balance. blood pH does not vary more than a minute amount from its expected level, except in cases of critical illness, disturbances in kidney function, or disease that affect control of breathing. So again, there's so many different things out there that could be causing it, but creating the best environment for yourself by exercising right, with lifestyle changes, with moderation in how much you consume, with whether you are still drinking alcohol or smoking cigarettes or those things, but not just that, but your dietary needs, right? Our culture, especially here in America, we overconsume so much, and it's so easy to get addicted to it without us even knowing. So becoming more vigilant with that within ourselves to understand, like, hey, I need to be on this way more, so then I know what that consumption is and I can help regulate to create the best version of my body, is massive, right? What did I have one from here? Oh, with kidney function, I did find another article. It has the 20 best foods for people with kidney disease. So just for kidney health, there are alternatives, and it does talk about like diabetes and high blood pressure being risk factors for kidney disease. However, obesity, smoking, genetics, gender, and age. I don't like how they use gender, because gender is psychological. If the world can please stop using that misnomer. I mean, even in queer theory, gender is separate than sex. So it's your biological sex is unchanging, but your gender is fluid. There's a lot of psychological studies behind that. We can do another segment on that. It's literally two different things. They're not the same thing. And everyone keeps using it, gender, as a misnomer for sex, including Healthline and other many other medical facilities too. And I don't like it. Anyway, those are also risk factors. Uncontrolled blood sugar and high blood pressure can cause damage to blood vessels in the kidneys, reducing their ability to function optimally. When the kidneys aren't working properly, waste builds up in the blood, including waste products from food. Therefore, it's necessary for people with kidney disease to follow a specific diet. I think they did clarify here. Yeah, so for dietary restrictions vary depending on the level of kidney damage. Again, it's very specific to each person, which is why these tests exist, to see what is wrong with you and what the actual course of action is to follow after that. For example, people in the early stages of kidney disease have different restrictions than those with kidney failure, also known as end-stage renal disease, or ESRD. Right? If you have kidney disease, your healthcare provider will determine the best diet for your needs. For most people with advanced kidney disease, it's important to follow a kidney-friendly diet that helps decrease the amount of waste in the food, and also referred to as a renal diet. So yeah, all these things help boost kidney function while preventing further damage. While dietary restrictions vary, it's commonly recommended that all people with kidney disease restrict the following nutrients: sodium, so salt, potassium, and phosphorus. And then it says protein is another nutrient that people with kidney disease may need to limit, because overconsumption anyway, right? As damaged kidneys can't clear out waste products from protein metabolism. However, those with end-stage renal disease undergoing dialysis, which is a treatment that filters and cleans the blood, right, have greater protein needs. So again, it's all very specific to the individual. Okay. And it goes through like 20 different ones, and it actually gives relatively how much, like how much each of them has for sodium, potassium, and phosphorus. Just go run through the list: cauliflower, blueberries, sea bass, red grapes, egg whites, garlic. I like that they use garlic as an alternative to salt, while for flavor, and providing nutritional benefits. Buckwheat, olive oil. So buckwheat and bulgur it has on here, both whole grains, but it has here many whole grains tend to be high in phosphorus, but buckwheat is one of those exceptions, and is also gluten-free. I believe bulgur is as well. Cabbage, skinless chicken, bell peppers, onions, arugula, macadamia nuts, radish. This stuff's making me hungry. Turnips, pineapple. I don't know why they have that on there. Cranberries, shiitake mushrooms, yeah. There's so many different things that you can have on there. And I know I bypass blueberries, which are a natural antioxidant, so they are really good for you. Last thing I wanted to end it on was, like I said, from Harvard Medical School, it does go into understanding the stress response, how the body reacts into it, and how cortisol, which is another hormone that is released by your sympathetic nervous system during your fight or flight, with norepinephrine and epinephrine, and how it helps to maintain that. And I believe it goes into like sounding the alarm, how it actually reacts. The stress response elicits this response from your brain and your body, right? Your hypothalamus, and it acts like I believe it acts like your sympathetic nervous system acts like a gas pedal, and your parasympathetic nervous system acts as a brake. Is how they put it, which I really like that analogy, because it gives a much better visual for me that it has on here. So yeah, stalling a little bit. All these changes can happen so quickly that people aren't aware of them. In fact, the wiring is so efficient that the amygdala and the hypothalamus start this cascade, which it is like a cascade of hormones and chemicals, even before the brain's visual centers have had a chance to fully process what is happening. That's why people are able to jump out of the path of an oncoming car even before they think about what they're doing. And again, that's because our bodies are constantly pulling in information from our environment. Okay? There's so many other factors for this that are involved. I believe there was even a study on people that are clinically blind, that they found, I think it was like, I want to say 17 or 27 different receptors all on the face, which they are now heightened, now that their visual acuity has been impaired, that still send information of where they pull from. There's a lot of great studies out there for this. As the initial surge of epinephrine subsides, the hypothalamus activates a second component of the stress response system, known as the Hpa Axis. This network consists of the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland. So HPA, that is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Okay? The HPA axis relies on a series of hormonal signals to keep the sympathetic nervous system, the gas pedal, pressed down. Okay? If the brain continues to perceive something as dangerous, the hypothalamus releases I'm gonna butcher this, corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH, which travels to the pituitary gland, triggering the release of adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, which is part of your energy system, I believe. This hormone travels to the adrenal glands, prompting them to release cortisol. And then the body thus stays revved up and on high alert. When the threat passes, cortisol levels fall, and the parasympathetic nervous system, the brake, then dampens the stress response. Okay? So just like I had talked about before, your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight, it's meant there for a reason. Your parasympathetic nervous system is your relaxation mode. Put us back down to zero. Not be so highly reactive with that. Right? It's meant to improve relaxation, improve digestion and healing in the body, because it can't do that when it's tightened up and everything's restricted, because we have to move. It's preparing us to move in case something happens. And what this study actually goes, or this article continues on with, is techniques to counter chronic stress, because chronic stress, being continuous in that fight or flight mode of having that, which can be elicited by emotional or physical responses like stress, right? We can counteract that. So the relaxation response, what they were talking about here,
like
just
meditation.
So right here, the Dr. Herbert Benson, Director Emeritus of the Benson Henry Institute for Mind-Body Medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital, has devoted much of his career to learning how people can counter the stress response by using a combination of approaches that elicit the relaxation response. So, moving from your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, to the relaxation response in your parasympathetic nervous system. These include deep abdominal breathing, focus on soothing words such as peace or calm. which is another word for, it's just another way of saying a mantra, right? Visualization of tranquil scenes, so visualization. Repetitive prayer, yoga, which a repetitive prayer is kind of like a mantra. Yoga, which is like a meditation in certain poses. It's like a stability and meditation at the same time. And Tai Chi, which is like a moving meditation. So all these things, most of the research using objective measures to evaluate how effective the relaxation response is at countering chronic stress have been conducted in people with hypertension and other forms of heart disease. I believe it goes even further into this about like how they did a study on, was it like 122 patients with hypertension ages 55 and older, and how it responded. And I think over half, I think it was about half, a little more than half of them actually had a reduction. Yeah, it says here, relaxation response training and half in the control group. I guess I'll just read it. Researchers at Massachusetts General Hospital conducted a double-blind, randomized, controlled trial of 122 patients with hypertension, ages 55 and older, in which half were assigned to relaxation response training and the other half to a control group that received information about blood pressure control. After 8 weeks, 34 of the people who practiced the relaxation response, a little more than half, had achieved a systolic blood pressure reduction of more than 5 millimeters per mercury, which is Hg on here, and were therefore eligible for the next phase of the study, in which they could reduce levels of blood pressure medication they were taking. During the second phase, 50% were able to eliminate at least one blood pressure medication, significantly more than in the control group, where only 19% eliminated their medication. And then, yeah, it goes into like physical activity, support, things like that. I think I missed one, and I think there was another one trying to say like how, it's Mr. Bean, like different things that you can do to help combat. It was like a whole list of activities. I think it was for endorphins, like how to release it. So a lot of those things, again, the negative effects of certain things like deficiencies like in endorphins and whatnot, depression, anxiety, moodiness, aches and pains, addiction, trouble sleeping, impulsive behavior, right? And then ways to naturally do it, again, how to fight these things and to release it. So first one on here is actually eat dark chocolate. Which I know you're like, yes, eat dark chocolate. Exercise, and any form of exercise will do, but exercising in a group is even better. So have sex, I should say have safe sex. Create music or art, so fulfillment. Dance, have a glass of wine, get acupuncture, laugh. I mentioned laughing before and how that's healthy for you. And enjoy your favorite dish, get a massage, take a sauna, eat something spicy, try some aromatherapy, watch your favorite TV show, meditate, or volunteer. So when they do these studies like this at Harvard, again, this is only trying to see if there is a response for it, and because stress and emotions and your biochemistry and your anatomy, just your straight up anatomy and physiology, they're all so complex in there. Again, there's no cookie cutter response, and usually doing multiple things will bring you back around to that. And going back to this study where they're talking about your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system, the thing is though, unless you are trying to apply that break from your parasympathetic nervous system through deep abdominal breathing, through visualization, through mantras or whatever like that, you're waiting for the rest of your body to try to catch up, okay? But because your cortisol levels are still high, and that's why it's harder to release a lot of those emotions, right? So when you're trying to release a lot of these, especially these base emotions, which are meant for you to survive, then you're going to stay stuck in that and possibly have chronic stress, right? The corporate world does this notoriously. They will keep you in that fight or flight mode. Why do you think people talk about when they're late? Oh my gosh, it's an either or. I'm either get there on time or I'm gonna lose my job, and they stress out about it. I know there was somebody that I was riding in a car with for a project that we did, and I was carpooling with him, and every morning that we met up, it's just like he was constantly in this state so much that all he would would do. He'd be yelling in the car over things that weren't even affecting him at the moment, just because he was so stuck in that sort of mindset. And again, that's that corporate lifestyle is meant to keep you that way, and that's why so much chronic stress is a big problem, right? But doing a lot of those different activities to help us mitigate stress, to release more endorphins, to release more of those good hormones and chemicals in our bodies, or even doing something as small as biting a pencil or pen. That is something that's going to help us apply that brake a little bit more often and a little bit more control over it, and not letting, like all our emotions, which are driven or which are driving our sympathetic nervous system, to just continue down with your gas pedal. Like think of a car engine. If you just continuously leave it down constantly full blast, you're going to ruin your engine. Same thing with your body. You will ruin your body and your psyche and everything else that's involved, and you may not see exactly where it is. Okay? So that's where where, like,
doing it regularly,
absolutely. So there's just so much that's involved in it, and trying to do more of these activities to get us out of that chronic stress becomes very, very important with just health, overall health, and remaining in it. And you know what, social media, it's a new version of it, and I'm surprised there's not much that I've seen, but then again, it could be that I just haven't looked into it, for psychological studies, the ramifications of it. I've seen a few of them here and there, but less about like overall effects of it, more of like specific, like this many people tend to say this or feel this particular way. I'm trying to remember some of the studies, but because again, it was very few and it was quite a while ago, and I'm more surprised of how hard it was for me to try to find more things about it when I tried to research it when I wrote that article. Was it last year sometime? So I know I've been talking a lot during this, and I know this is new, which I kind of like that you didn't get a chance to really go through all this. So what are your thoughts on all of this?
Just what I was telling you right now, just doing it regularly. I cannot say that word right now. Right? Because if you don't do it, then at that point, are you allowing yourself to slip back into old habits,
Mm-hmm. That's that cyclic behavior that I keep talking about.
Like relapsing.
Yeah, in a relapse. Cyclic behavior, we are creatures of habit. That's just how we are. We literally adapt. Our bodies unconsciously adapt. And then we adapt to certain situations, and then we run into that cycle as if that's going to be the norm. That's literally like micro evolutions that go on in our body. It's just like taking a poison, right? You take a little bit of a poison every day, you build more and more of a resistance of it, and you can take more of it over a longer period of time. It's that consistency of it, right? And that same thing goes for like alcohol, nicotine, caffeine. It's another one, all those things. They just mess with your biochemistry so much, right? On top of that, you have external chronic stress things like the corporate world, your job, now politics, social media, propaganda, relationships, all these other factors, So why it becomes really important to really take that time to do that spiritual development, because I've talked to you a lot about that too. Like, spiritual development is not necessarily religious per se, but it is literally internal reflection, right? They talked about visualization and stuff like that, or prayer, right? Prayer, mantra, focusing on certain words, certain frequencies of words that help go there. The old school one, like I still see some satire about it, is like that Om type of thing that people use in mantras. That's a real thing, right? It's a vibration that they use to try to elicit the parasympathetic nervous system. Crazy. And now science, again, a lot of these things were found in a lot of Eastern philosophies and practices, and the Western medicine and sciences are only like, now you're starting to see a little bit more of them in the past like decade or so, right? And again, it's not necessarily like it to be taken as far, and again, it could be, but as far as say like the New Age spirituality, where it goes to higher planes of existence, you know, to like astral projection and stuff like that. And again, you may have experiences with that stuff, which is fine, right? And you may believe in those things, which is fine. But there are no technical ways to really show it. And I know they've done studies about these things from, I think, as far back as like the 60s. You know, but I mean, there's a lot of studies that were going on for it too. But again, that's all just ways that the mind works, you know. Yeah, there's so much involved in it. Emotions are complex, extremely complex. What else are your thoughts? Because I know I'm still going off on there.
That's all I really have to say.
Okay, well, I appreciate you sitting through, because I know you're probably more relatable. A lot of people are like, oh my gosh, there's so many big words, so many science words, and I get it. But like I said, I'm a bit of a science geek. You know, I like learning about a lot of these things, and this is basic science, you know, anatomy, physiology, biology, you know, chemistry, things like that. And it goes even deeper. You don't necessarily have to go so deep into it. You know, you can learn a lot of this stuff and be able to utilize it. Again, just understanding your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight, and your relaxation processes, right? And then how we deal with stress, and we can recreate. I don't spit that. I'm sorry. It's like, we can recreate instances to counteract it. You know, I was talking about, like, if you have so much darkness that's overwhelming, how do you create more light? Well, you just had a list, right? There's so many different ways that we can do it. So many different ways that we can just reset and move forward from that. So, yeah, really exciting night. A lot of stuff going on. Hopefully you found this informative. I know we're going over a lot of different things in here, which is why I'm going to leave it up as a full video. Again, thank you. Unless you got any final thoughts.
No.
Yeah. Again, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to just go over all this stuff with me. And I like the fact, like I said, you're learning it. Some of this is like your first exposure to it. You know, so I get that whole glossing the eyes over, just exhaustion, overwhelming of information. But again, thank you. I appreciate you coming out here. And again, if you guys like this this type of content, I want to be doing more and more about this. I want to get more into cyclic behavior, how to reprogram yourself. You know, how you can actually interrupt certain things, and different tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, because it's rough. It's rough to try to say, how do I do all this stuff? And I literally didn't have anybody other than books that I read on meditation or Eastern philosophies and things like that, on how to put that into my own self, so then I can optimize so many different parts of my life. And I really want to give that back to you guys and to everybody, because I feel like we need it. You know, we kind of need it right now. Alright, again, if you like this content, please like, subscribe, share. This is the long version. It's like I probably cut it up and release other ones throughout the week. But again, thank you for watching the video, and we'll see you guys later.